Today I'm going over 5 albums that I think every Euphonium player should listen to. Stay tuned. What's going on, everybody? My name's Aaron, helping musicians get better, faster through performances, educational videos, and product reviews. And today I'm going over 5 solo Euphonium albums that I think every Euphonium player should listen to. Now, before we get too far into it, there's a ton. There's just so many great artists who are doing great things, and it would be impossible for me to cover like all or make a hit list, and I'm not even going to get into like trying to create the best because it's so subjective. These are just 5 albums that were really important to me, either when I was coming up as a musician, as a student, or that I recommend to my students now as a teacher. And even though there's a lot to learn from these things and they are educational, they're also just good albums and good music to listen to in general. It's about to be the 1-year anniversary of my album coming out, and since I'm putting it out there in digital and all new formats and I'm thinking about it again, I thought now's a great time for me to share some other artists' albums that I think are also really great. So let's kick it off with the very first one I want to mention. I could only pick one Stephen Mead, or I only wanted to put at least one per each artist on here, and even though Stephen has so many good albums and he puts out a lot of music, I decided to put this one because it was the most influential to me coming up and listening to music from great Euphonium players as I was a student. So the number 1 is actually Stephen Mead's Rondo. Now, I got into it because he was playing some of the things that I, as a student, was looking into and started becoming interested in. You know, you've got your Gypsy airs and your Rural Britannia kind of on the theme and variation, or like the fast wiggly stuff, but you've also got Pantomime, which, you know, that was the first time I'd ever heard a recording of it, was through that album, and that completely, you know, changed my outlook on what Euphonium literature could be. And especially because at the time it wasn't played by everybody at the time. You weren't hearing it over and over again, kind of like it is now. It was this new, fresh thing. And then you also have, you know, Rondo's a fantastic track on there. And he's playing Nessun Dorma. He's also got Flight of the Bumblebee. So there's a lot of stuff, especially for a younger player, to just really dig into and enjoy. So Stephen Mead's Rondo, highly, highly suggest. Now, the second one that I highly suggest everybody needs to listen to is Colonel Colburn playing in the Golden Age of Brass Volume 3. This was released in 1993, and for those of you who don't know, Colburn was Colonel Colburn. He was the director of the President's Own Marine Band, and also their solo Euphonium for some time. And this album has a lot of just the like big either transcription hits or just the like what the album says, what I call the Golden Age of Brass. So when we're thinking about like Clark and Arthur Pryor and Arbin, when you're thinking about like those things, just very, very what I call clean literature, that's this album. I mean, just starting with the first track, it's one of the, you know, heralds of Euphonium literature in All Those Endearing Young Charms. You've got the Concerto per Flaucorno Basso. You've got that in there. You've got O Mio Bambino Caro. You've got Old Lang Syne. Like, there's just a lot of really good, what I call clean literature. You know, fast stuff, slow stuff, pretty stuff, quick stuff. It's all there, and you know, Michael Colburn just kills it. Like, he plays so well. Highly, highly suggest this album, especially if you're like trying to figure out some like what are standard literature items for a Euphonium player, especially if you're looking for something like for your junior recital or something like that. Give this one a go. Speaking of, you know, trying to figure out stuff for younger players, on the slightly younger side though, still fantastic for college people, check out Pat Stuckelmeyer's Stepping Stones for Euphonium. There's also a tuba version of this, but Pat does the Euphonium one and he does it really well. Now, this album is literally intended to be a resource recording of solos. It seems like, you know, just on the hit list of things, like grades 4 to like 6 here in like the Florida list. It's a really good album when it comes to just resource recordings for younger people, or for just solos that are still really good, but aren't necessarily like you need to be in the top 10% of players to possibly pull off. So you've got like the Haddad, the Suite for Baritone, you've got the Introduction and Dance by Barad, you've got things like that that are just really good staples of the literature that Pat gives a really good reference recording of with piano accompaniment. So if you're currently in high school or younger in college and you're looking for something either for a recital or for something for like solo and ensemble, this is a really good place to look. Whenever I'm kind of running out of ideas or I'm trying to think of something fresh for my students to play, especially my high school kids, I kind of look into this album and I look at what the tracks are and I see what I can find inside of it. Highly, highly suggest this one. Now, my next album is called A War in Wonderland by AKCEuph. I just happen to physically have this one here with me right now. It actually has been in my car and I've been playing it essentially since I got it in, I think, January. It's been kind of going. And first off, it's got my favorite ever recording of the Aito Fantasy Variations. It also has one of my favorite just pieces bar none, which is Pearls by Roland Said Polly. That's in here, and she just crushes it. I mean, just does such a good job of it. And I also really like the title track, which I hadn't heard of before I grabbed this, A War in Wonderland. I think this thing came out in 2015, or at least that's the date on here. Most of this is in Japanese, and it's still available to you if you're in America or anywhere else and not Japan. You can still find a way to get a hold of it. But I thought this was really cool. My copy came signed. Now it's dated in 2015, which is not when I bought it at all, but still really cool. I still really appreciate it. Highly, highly suggest picking up AKCEuph's A War in Wonderland. And then finally, the last album that I'm gonna put on here is the Soliloquies by Damondre Thurman that was released in 2005. This album by itself is worth it just to listen to Damondre just masterfully navigate the John Stevens Soliloquies. If you've ever looked at that piece of paper, it's unaccompanied and it's a monster, man. It's rough, it's hard. And Damondre does what Damondre does and blows it out of the park. Also, he's really well accompanied by the University of Alabama's Wind Ensemble, and he does a concerto for euphonium and wind ensemble by Patrick Schultz that is a kind of an unsung hero in this album. It's so good, and it's I think criminally underplayed, or at least I don't hear it played that often. And this is a good album. You mentioned me talk about like clean music and like standard rep. This pushes the boundaries of that a little bit. I mean, obviously he plays it so well and the music is so good, but it's not your normal, it's not Carnival of Venice. It's not those things like I mentioned before. This is starting to push into more modern compositional techniques and things like that. And will stretch the listener a little bit and maybe expose you to some things that aren't typical euphonium literature. Oh, and a bonus 6th album. It's For Those That Wander by Aaron. If you guys haven't picked it up already, please do so. But I did want to give some honorable mentions that I did not necessarily mention in my list. Like I said earlier, it was hard for me to pick one by Stephen Mead. Pearls is actually my favorite album by him. It's just not the most influential to me as a student, but oh my goodness, the way the ensemble sounds in the second movement of Pearls 2 in here is just worthy. Another honorable mention, if you have not snagged it already, Joel Collier, friend of mine, now Dr. Joel Collier. His album is phenomenal and it shows a lot of really good rep that not a lot of people know about. It's called Shadowed. So good. Really, please snag it. Also, I hear that second baritone player in the brass band that's accompanying this is pretty good. Another artist that I want to mention that I feel terrible that he got left out of this list, because I've listened to so many of his recordings and I use like so much of his stuff for reference recordings, and that's Adam Fry, especially his Beyond the Horizon albums, both Volume 1 and Volume 2. Super resourceful. Go and check them out. I feel bad because not one album necessarily stood out, and I think that's actually his fault because he has put out so much good stuff that I used as references when I was a student. I couldn't shuffle through and pick just one. And finally, something that's kind of off of the track of this, but I think is really valuable to everybody. So I didn't include it in here because it's not necessarily a solo album, but if you want some good reference recordings of what the euphonium part specifically needs to sound like in AKCEuph, go and check out Mark Jenkins. He's got the euphonium AKCEuph for band. Go and check that out. I mean, he's got the stuff. I mean, he's got the Stars and Stripes, he's got the Pineapple Bowl, he's got Melody Shop, he's got the Chike 4s in there. Like, there's stuff, and not only does he play it for you, but he also gives a description of it. And he played with the Marine Band, so I think he knows what he's talking about with that. But anyway, that's all I've got for this one. That leads me to my question of the day. I'm pretty sure you see this coming, but what are some albums that I missed in this list that are wildly influential to you, either as a player or as a musician, or just music you like listening to? Let me know about those in the description down below. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. If you like this video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. They're really important, I guess. Please do that kind of stuff. Otherwise, I'm Aaron Campbell reminding you to be happy but never satisfied. I'll see you next time.